Produced by Podcast Architects.
You're listening to the Lead On podcast, where we discuss experiences in the armed forces while exploring lessons from military leaders.
Welcome back to another edition of Lead On, Lessons from Military Leaders. Today I'm joined with Chris Cassidy. Chris is a retired Navy captain, and he's currently the president and CEO of the Medal of Honor Museum in Arlington, Texas. Chris, good morning.
Good morning. Great to be with you, David.
Well, hey, thanks for being here. Thank you for your service. 30 years in the Navy. We'll talk a little bit about that and how you came about joining and the unique career path that you took, which is not very common, to go from an active duty SEAL to an astronaut. I mean, wow, I'm excited for you to be able to share that and share your passion of aerospace and then how you got into the current position as the president and CEO of the Medal of Honor Museum. So to kick things off, though, I'd just like to hear, since we are a leadership nonprofit and we want to explore leadership and your experiences of leadership, not every piece of leadership advice that we've either given or received has been the best. So what's maybe one of the worst pieces of leadership advice that someone ever gave you?
I had a fun time thinking about that, but you have a Navy background. Of course, you've heard the saying, "A bitchin' sailor is a happy sailor." And I actually, for the longest time, I thought that was okay. That's information that's helpful to me, but I actually think now, with the lens of retrospect and a little bit of more maturity, I think that's probably the worst leadership advice I ever received. Members of a unit, be it military, civilian, whatever, if they're dissatisfied about something, they'll let you know, and those things are things that leadership should be aware of and should either strive to correct, or if it's just a nature of the way the system that you're in, let people know that, hey, that's not something we can change. We understand it's a sore point, but we hear you loud and clear. So I don't buy into the concept of people are if they're not complaining, they're not happy. That to me was the worst advice I ever got as a young military person.
Yeah, and I agree. I think our time of service, if I remember, you transitioned out around 2018, 2019. And
21.
Oh, 21, forgive me. And so so those same 80s, 90s, 2000s, yeah, I certainly remember that, and probably a product of that as well. I would just share, I realized a few years ago, literally maybe 2 or 3, I'm listening to myself through one of our leadership classes, getting upset and getting angry, dare I say, bitching about something. But I would always justify it as, no, I'm being passionate. And I really had to take a step back and say, no, that's not passion. That's just me complaining. And that's it. But to your point, recognizing that, and if somebody is complaining to you about something, maybe instead of ignoring them or justifying it, just like, hey, maybe I need to listen to them and see what's going on. Particularly important in the civilian community, for sure. A lot of things in that as we transition. I appreciate that. So let's just start from the beginning. What was it that attracted you to the Navy? And I remember you even had, as you got into the SEALs, you didn't even know what the SEALs were, which is amazing when we think about that today. People probably like, what do you mean you didn't know what SEALs are?
Yeah. You're exactly right. So I graduated high school in 1988, and I never thought about, I was not a kid thinking about space flight. I was not a kid thinking about military life. I loved sports and I enjoyed playing sports. So my connection to the military academies were the Army-Navy game. And my brother and dad and I would watch that game every single year. And I remember always being impressed by the people marching on and the uniforms and the pomp and circumstance. And then they would show images of the school. And then when I got later in my high school years, and actually was really starting to think about college and how do you pay for it and all of that, is when I learned about the Naval Academy. And it's free to go there. You just have to be in the Navy, which in my 17-year-old brain, I'm like, yeah, I'll be in the Navy. I don't care. Sure, that sounds fun. And I didn't understand at that point that there's lots of different things you can do, fly airplanes, be on ships, submarines, SEAL teams, a variety of other things. But it didn't matter. I thought, okay, that'll be fine. And so that was the initial impetus to apply to the service academies. I knew I wanted to go to the Naval Academy. I liked that area. I liked Annapolis. I liked that particular. I didn't have any deep thought about I wanted to be a Navy guy over an Army guy. Not in high school, anyways. It was more about where I wanted to be physically in the country. So that was kind of it. And if you remember back then, that was pre-internet, and nobody really knew about the SEAL teams unless you were in a military town and you had if you lived in Norfolk or San Diego, you might know about SEALs. But for me, I had never even heard of that community until I got to the Naval Academy Prep School, where it is in Newport, Rhode Island, and the Officer Candidate School is right next door to Naval Academy Prep School. And there were a few enlisted SEALs coming to OCS, and I saw them running around and saw them in the chow hall, and learned a little bit about what they do.
Yes, it's kind of funny too. You think 1988, that's when Top Gun hit the streets. And so everybody joining at that time wanted to be a pilot. They wanted to be the next Tom Cruise. And here you are just thinking, I can go play Navy for a little bit. And then you find yourself joining the teams. As you went through that training, I've often wondered, is it buds that everybody sees, and you see all the History Channel stuff on, and the focus is on buds? Is it buds that makes a SEAL? Or is it the buds that separates you, and it's really all that training after the fact? Where's really the emphasis? Where's the where's the leadership that comes from that? Like what leadership value did you learn? Because clearly you made it through buds and then after buds.
Yeah. Leadership is leadership and followership. And I've kind of got to appreciate that more in my NASA career, and I can talk about that a little bit later. But I didn't realize that at the time I was going through SEAL training is, you're a leader of a small group. But I was at ensign, and there were several ensigns in my buds class. So by default, I was what's called a boat crew leader, and the class is divided up into groups of about 6 or 7 or 8 people per boat crew, and the most senior member in the boat crew is a boat crew leader. So I was a leader of those folks, but then in part of the class, I was following the class leadership. And so this shifting between leadership and followership is something that happens very rapidly in a dynamic environment like buds, like SEAL training. And but I think the true essence, for me anyways, of SEAL training is to really understand that you can't get through it alone. The job of the instructors, the professional staff there, it's to push each individual to their physical and mental limits, and sometimes those are matched, and sometimes the physical happens before the mental, or vice versa. And then each individual person gets to those limits at a different time than the other person. So it's when you arrive to that moment where you're like, I got nothing left, you realize that the person to the right or left of you is there with you, just as hungry, just as tired, just as miserable as you are, and you get through it together. And then you provide assistance knowingly or unknowingly to somebody another time, just like they do it to you. And so that's, I think, the basis of buds. And then to your question, what makes you become a SEAL? There's a tremendous amount of specialized, really technical training that happens after SEAL buds, what everybody thinks of SEAL training as. that's just kind of creates the mold of the clay that's needed to then go forth and add all of the finishing touches on.
Interesting. I appreciate that. I know a guy, he was, so people probably are, so we have SEALs, and then we also have SWCC, the Special Warfare Combat Crew. And people, those are those boats, those small, fast boats that bring SEALs ashore in some of the missions. So a friend of mine's son went through SWCC, and prior to going through, I was able to introduce him to somebody involved in that community. And this person had asked him, "Why do you want to do this?" And this young man didn't have an answer. And he was told, you need to have your why, because to your point, like you said, when you're hungry, tired, exhausted, beat up, drained, without that why, what will keep you going? So did you have a why? I mean, having never know anything about SEALs, but then whatever attracted you, and you went there, and I'm sure whether it was during Hell Week or sometime before or after, even beyond that, what were your why to keep it going?
That's a good question. For me, there's a little bit of it is I just don't want to quit, but that's very vague. And I learned later, and again, this, you gain knowledge through experience in life, right? And oftentimes when you're doing it, you don't realize, especially when you're 23 years old, you just kind of, I got to do 10 push-ups, roger that, I got to do 10 push-ups. But I think now I understand myself a little better, and I have this inherent fear of letting people down who I love. And I don't want to be the guy that we don't succeed because I didn't do my job, whether it's in training or in professional life or family or whatever. And so my why for the longest time, and pretty much my whole life, has been, if we fail, it's not going to be because I didn't do my stuff. And then in the SEAL training class, you rely on each other. Somebody's responsible for boats, somebody's responsible for the life jackets, somebody's responsible for whatever. You can fill in the blanks. And I just always wanted to do my best for the stuff I was responsible for.
That is, when we first met, you talked about courage, and there's different forms of courage. And I think what you kind of gave because that same courage that you had, because you don't want to fail, you don't want to be that guy. Did that carry with you after the service into civilian life? The same as, I know for me personally, I thought I was a certain person, both in uniform and out of uniform. And it wasn't until I transitioned out that I realized that wasn't the case, that I did not display that same courage to my family as I did to my family at home as I did to my family in uniform. So, what's your experience with that word courage? Even at Sailor, the year boards, define honor, courage, commitment. When people would define courage, they had a challenge to finding that word.
Yeah. It's funny, in my current role as a president of the Medal of Honor Museum, we are trying to come up with good definitions for those character traits: courage, honor, patriotism, sacrifice, so that we're all, as a staff, and we're putting out consistent messaging. And it's actually pretty difficult to summarize words like that, because they can mean so many things. They resonate with people differently. But the one part for me that I think about courage is that it's not translatable to every aspect of one's life. Like, somebody can perform a courageous act as a military person on the battlefield or whatever. Somebody can, in a school, courageously stop a shooter. But that same person might shy away from a difficult conversation or telling a loved one that that they have a problem with something they're doing. Those things require courage of a different kind. So it was eye-opening for me to think about that the courage can be displayed in one aspect of our lives, but not another, and that's normal. And we're all normal people, and we all have fear or fearless. I don't think anyone is ever fearless, but we all have varying degrees of fear in our lives, and it requires courage to deal with that. Part of the thing I'm often asked about spaceflight, like, how were you afraid when you climbed on to the rocket and they lit it on fire and off you went? And my response to that is, I think fear comes from uncertainty. And so the more you can dial down the uncertainty, the more you can get a handle on fear. And you think about it, like when you experience something for the first time, you don't know what you're getting into and you can be nervous. But if you've seen it, if you trained for it, if you've done it in the simulator, or if you've been in that situation on the soccer field, whatever, you have less anxiety, you have less fear because you've experienced a similar situation.
Yeah. So true. I guess I have fear every time I get in the car just because I don't have control over all those other cars around me.
Right.
But before we jump into the NASA, I have one more follow-up to courage. So in your capacity, you've met, I'm sure, plenty of Medal of Honor recipients, and you've read, so many other citations or awards from those that are no longer with us. At least from the people that you've met, is there a common courage, a common trait maybe that, and I don't know, but that maybe you've seen that, well, that explains why this individual did what they did?
I don't know if there's a common one, but one of the common answers I hear when talking to the various living Medal of Honor recipients, because that's a great sample set to explore this concept of courage with, is, if not me, then who? And if not now, then when? And some of them use those exact words, others that use similar wording, but hey, the unit was pinned down by suppressive enemy fire. Somebody had to take an action, and I was in a spot that was the most advantageous to move. Or, those soldiers that were dying on the hill in Vietnam, and we had to get a helicopter in there, and I was in the helicopter, so I flew right into the hot landing zone. So that if not me, then who kind of thing, I think is very common kind of mindset with the recipients of the Medal of Honor that I've met.
I appreciate that. That's good. So how many years did you do in SEALs before you transitioned to NASA, and what was the motivation? It's even harder to get to be an astronaut than it is to be a SEAL.
Yeah. I had been in the Navy for 11 years when I got selected and transferred over. One year, about the first year after commissioning, was, buds and jump school and all of the training. So 10 years, 1 year of training, 10 years as a active qualified Navy SEAL. And then in 2004, I was selected to be an astronaut and moved over to NASA. What motivated me to apply was really pretty simple. I met Bill Shepard, who was the first Navy SEAL to become an astronaut, and he had gone to graduate school at MIT, and I was going to graduate school at MIT, and the light bulb dawned for me, like, oh, well, my background is lining up to be similar to his, and they thought that he was a competitive applicant for NASA, so maybe I could be as well, and why not try? So I talked to Bill Shepard, and he introduced me to the astronaut selection office and the people there, and told me how the process works and when they apply, when they take applications, and all of the mechanics of it. And then I applied and got, because I actually applied one time prior we select astronauts about every 4 years. And I applied in the class of 2000 and did not get an interview, but I hadn't completed graduate school. I hadn't had 9/11 hadn't happened yet, so I didn't have experience overseas. And 4 years later, I was just a much more well-rounded applicant and was selected.
That's great that you didn't get discouraged the first time and you stuck with it and learned from it. So how many space flights, how many missions did you?
So I worked at NASA for just about 18 years, like 17 and a half years. The whole time I was there, I was an active duty Navy person. You can think of it as my PCS duty station was the Johnson Space Center, but my time towards retirement and fit reps and every 6-month PRT, all that stuff was normal, like a regular Navy person. So in that time frame, I flew 3 space flights. The first of which was on a space shuttle Endeavour in STS-127 in the summer of 2009, and then my second mission was on a Russian Soyuz in 2013, and my third and final mission was also on a Russian Soyuz in 2020. All 3 missions, I went to the space station. The shuttle missions were short duration. We stayed for 2 weeks. And they came home, delivered a bunch of cargo, and helped complete the assembly of the space station. And then my second and third mission were both 6 months long, so I lived on the station for a little over a year of my life.
Wow! And what's that like? I mean, we've all seen photos or pictures, videos. Is there anything some experience or something you could tell us that, this is the reality, or not this is the reality, but just something we may not necessarily common knowledge, nothing classified, obviously, but what's kind of a unique thing about maybe not even there, but what about, when you come back from that deployment?
Well, I could talk for hours about just this one question.
I'm sure.
The uniqueness of, there's uniqueness of launching, there's a uniqueness of floating, there's a uniqueness of living long term on the space station, and it just becomes your daily routine, and coming back, and each and every one of those is a whole different answer. But it's so cool to float. It's so cool to look out the window and see Earth below you, and realize that it's there's 8 billion people down here, and you're one of 3 or 6 people that are off the planet and having this unique viewpoint of the spaceship that we call Earth. And but then you're up there, and the space station is a big machine. It requires maintenance, just like the ships that you were on. And every machine is either broken or it's going to break. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter the interval between those, and the space station is the same thing. And so we're constantly doing maintenance. However, the primary mission of the space station is to conduct science and research that will help make life better on Earth, or improve our ability to explore this cosmos. And so probably 60% of our time is devoted to that mission. 20% of the time is maintaining the space station, either corrective or preventative maintenance. And the other balance of the 20% is maintaining ourselves, exercise, sleeping, eating, all that stuff.
What'd you guys, what'd you do for entertainment with each other?
Well, we have movie library, we have music, we've got a few musical instruments. There's a keyboard, a guitar, a harmonica, if you were so inclined. I'm not a musical guy, so those things never came out of the bag while I was up there, but others, that's a big part of it. But I think for me, it was most enjoyable because cool experiences are cool experiences. Cool experiences with people that you love and care for are just amazing things. And I felt that way about my crew members. And so I just really liked hanging out, chatting with the crew members were all international crew. I've flown with members of the Russian Space Agency, European Space Agency, Canadian Space Agency, Japanese Space Agency. So it's really special to be up there with a mix of people from different countries, all of them that you know well, and then laugh together, worry together, work hard together. That part was a lot of fun. Now, that makes it sound like it's all a bunch of work. It's not. If you try to go somewhere on a 6-month, you've done 6-month deployments. If every single day was a full work day, you'd be completely fried. You got to have some time off, downtime, even if it's just like 2 shifts on a ship or something where you don't have any responsibility. Otherwise, you're prone to make errors, and we take that very, very seriously on your error rate. And whether you made a mistake because you skipped the line of the procedure, but you didn't actually do anything, but you missed it, or that's a small example, or you actually throw the wrong switch because you're super sleepy and tired and you're not paying attention, and we want to prevent all that. So pay a lot of attention to work rest cycles.
Thank you for listening today to the conversation with Chris Cassidy. I want to invite you to visit the Medal of Honor Museum online by going to www.mohmuseum.org, where you can learn about the museum. And then after you're done, shoot on over to the Enlisted Leadership Foundation's page at www.enlistedleadershipfoundation.org, where you can learn about the Enlisted Leadership Foundation and our programs as well.
Produced by Podcast Architects.